Hello, welcome back to the Book Nook. Today we're going to be reading We Love You Bunny by Mona Awad. I've already finished this book, so to me, 5 days ago. Okay, so I read the first 120 pages of We Love You Bunny by Mona Awad. Um, so here's the summary for it. Here's the first 120 pages. So we open with essentially it's called back to the other book, but Samantha doesn't talk really, at least in the first 120 pages. She actually doesn't say really anything. Like the whole conversation of her is just mumbling. So it opens with the bunnies, which I think is actually a great choice. They start talking and they're like, "We had to kidnap you, Samantha. We had to bring you here." You don't hear Samantha talking, but they're in Creepy Doll's attic. What's her name? Kira. So they start speaking, and then you hear a lot. So it opens with Cupcake starting to talk. She's the first one to speak, and she tells Bunny a story. She's like, "Oh, like you wrote your novel because the first novel is essentially Samantha's story. This is now Bunny's story, or Bunny's story. This is now their story, the bunnies." So we have Cupcake. She starts talking first, or Caroline. I'll refer to her as both, but you know what I'm talking about. So Cupcake, she talks about their meeting. So she goes into this story and she talks about the first day on campus when she was at like it was like a dinner thing they were all at, and she saw Kira first or Kira. But you realize in this novel, which I think is such a strong choice, by the way, that she decides that she starts talking. She's like, "You decided to name her Kira in your novel, but her real name is Kyra," which I was gagged. I was like, "That's great! Like that's so interesting." But so she ends up talking. I'm gonna call her Kira anyway, but just know her name in the novel is Kyra. Um, but so she sees Kira and she's like, "Oh, like let's talk." Like she goes up to her and she talks about this very intense poll. Like fate almost decided it. So she goes to Kira, she starts talking to her. Her and Kira like hit it off, they speak, like they have fun, and then they look across the garden and they see um what's her name? Victoria. They see Victoria. Victoria's name is also different in this. Her name is Victoria, but it's spelled with a K instead. And they see her and they go over to her and they all three start talking. And they're all like, "Oh, like, like it's cool to meet." Like they start speaking. And then Victoria goes over and talks to the Duchess, or what's her name? Oh, Eleanor. Or Eleanor, but we don't get to hear what they say to each other. And Eleanor is also talking to Frosco or Ursula or I can't actually remember her real name, but she's the professor from the last novel. Everyone in this book has like 30 different names. But I'm pretty down with it now. Like I think I've got them all pretty good after the first one. But so now that we're here, they all leave, and Victoria just disappears. Like it literally says in the book, she just like leaves, and then Eleanor and Frosco also leave. So now that they're gone, we're just alone with Kira and Cupcake or Caroline. Um, I'm just gonna call them by the real names. We're alone with Caroline and Kira. So Kira is like talking to Caroline and she's like, "Oh, like let's walk home." So they walk to Caroline's house, then back to Kira's house, then to Caroline's house, then back to Kira's house, and then they get to Kira's house and or they get to Caroline's house and she's like, "Why don't you just stay the night?" But she talks about regretting asking it, and then she talks about feeling like she loses her personhood, which I think is such an interesting concept. Like a lot of the times in this book, they'll talk about feeling like they've lost who they are. Like they start to form a hive mind, which is interesting. But I will say, I'm not a fan of that. I'm not a fan of the reading mind stuff. I know it's I can't like. It's not the worst thing in the world, but it's not my favorite. I will say it's not my favorite thing. But to each their own. And so now they're walking home and Kira stays the night. So they go back to Kira's house, they come back to Caroline's house, she's staying the night. And there is this intense, and when I say intense, I mean intense homoeroticism between Kira and Cupcake or Caroline. And it's actually so interesting and it really propels the story forward. Because like this is really like the first bunny, but just the bunnies. Like you really start to understand who they are as people and the connections that they carry to each other. So far, great. Um, But so now there's a scene. They go to sleep and they wake up, and when they wake up, they have switched dresses, which I think is so funny. And they're cuddling, like intensely cuddling. Like it describes them as like entangled. When I first read that, I thought they had sex. They did not have sex. They were just cuddling, I guess. But so, and I think it's supposed to be implied that they did because the book says we slept together, and then it's like they woke up and they cuddled, but they later clarify. So then they end up going to the first workshop together. And they talk about this actually earlier, like that was like that's how they met. They're like, "Oh, you're part of the fiction cohort too." Like that's how Victoria, um, Caroline, and Kira all decided were going to be friends, I guess. So now we're on our way to the workshop. On the way to the workshop, they see this bunny, and it runs in the middle of the road. It stares at them, and they talk about how they've never felt anything so intense in their entire life. Also, there's a lot of this, like, between Kira and Caroline, there's a lot of talk of them just being so insanely close. Like, they talk so much about how they've never felt this close to anyone in their life, how it's like almost an instant mental connection, and it's very, very interesting. Also, so now we end up in the cave, and so Kira walks in. Kira and Victoria, or no, Kira and Caroline walk in together, right? Because they were at the house together. They walk in together, and then Victoria's already sitting there. She's just waiting for them. They sit down. They say like hi, hello, like some other stuff, and then the Duchess comes in, and she's waiting with them. And the Duchess is Eleanor. There it is. The Duchess of Eleanor. And then they're waiting for Frosco or Ursula to come in, and they're like, "Oh, like she's gonna show up, like she's gonna like bring us her wisdom." Because keep in mind, they're fans. Like it doesn't say it in the first book, but in this one it really goes into it. Like they have tattoos of her. Like they are fans of her. So like getting teased by her was like the best thing that could have ever happened to them. So now that she walks in and they're like waiting, and she doesn't walk in because who walks in is the lion. And if you don't know who the lion is, you should watch my last video to understand who the lion is. All the girls, like all the bunnies, are freaking out, and they're really angry, and they're talking about, "Oh, like you're not our teacher. Like I don't know what you're doing here." And he talks about how Frosco got offered a better opportunity, which I think is so hilarious. And the way she's portrayed in this is so interesting. And the way she speaks to them, Frosco doesn't like them. And in the first novel, it really comes off as though she does, like she's part of their little clique. And maybe she does become later, and maybe it will act more like that later. But here, she's just annoyed. Like she doesn't want to be around them. She doesn't want to deal with them. That's like she's just not trying to be near them. The professor makes Cupcake read one of his pieces, and he's sitting there, and he's like, "This is like bad. Like this is not good." And Cupcake freaks out. She has like breakdown. She's like in the garden area, like crying, sobbing. Also, there's a lot of like Cupcake cutting herself in this book. Like she has this razor in her pocket that she sticks her fingers into, and she does it so bad that it literally like bleeds all the way down her pants. And he just looks at her, like the lion just stares at her and is like, "I'm sorry, but like it's just not good." Um, so she's like bleeding everywhere, and keep in mind, this is not her dress. This is still Kira's dress. And Kira's thinking about that while comforting her. They end up out in this rose garden, which is a new location in this novel. And they're sitting out there, and there's like a statue of a rabbit. It's just literally roses, and she's like sobbing, like crying, like it's pretty rough. And then Kira like starts to comfort her. She starts to hug her, and then she's like, they're all crying together, and the rabbit shows up, and a rabbit's in her lap, and she looks in this rabbit's eyes, and it changes color, like breakdown. She's like talking, she's like he hates me, like he doesn't want to be near me anymore, and that's the end of her section. So there's Cupcake, there's no more. So then we trade into Kira's section. Kira backs up the story a little bit. We're back at Cupcake's house, and Kira says that no, they actually Caroline actually begged Kira to stay the night, and she actually wanted her to stay the night, and she wouldn't let her leave. And then they actually both do talk about, though, how intertwined they are as people. And then she talks about comforting Kira, but in Kira's retelling of events, she was the one who went and picked up the rabbit, gave it to Caroline to sit in her lap to comfort her. And then as all four of them were hugging her, its eyes changed. and she talks about how she's lying and like she shouldn't be lying like that. Basically, then Creepy Doll or Kira's like, actually, I made the bunny. I'm actually magical. I'm the magical one. You guys aren't magical. I'm magical. And then the bunny leaves. He runs away. They try to catch him. They can't. And so they just walk. They literally hold hands and they just go walking. And they walk all the way to Kira's apartment and they go into the attic without even talking. Like they don't even have a conversation. And this is the attic. And they go and they sit there and they're talking and they're talking about how they must be magic, like how this is like this is impossible or whatever. And then they're like, it's our bunny, like we're magic, like blah 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 blah. And then they decide that they're not magic. It's like really weird. They get in this like big fight and they're like, we're actually not magic. And they decide that they hate their professor. They email Frosco and they're like, hey, like we really can't be with this professor anymore. We need you like to help. So they all go to the professor's house. So after they email her, they have this like weird cult after everything, and they talk about how, oh, she's so awful, or he's so awful, sorry. They talk about how he's so awful and how he constantly criticizes their writing and how there's no possible way he could criticize their writing because it's that good. And then there's a lot of interesting stuff in this book. So they talk about how much they really don't like each other, like, which I think is so true to life, by the way. But she'll be like, oh, like she said that, but she's wrong. Actually, I'm the one who's magical. No, actually, I'm the one who's magical. And then there's a part where Creepy Doll talks about how Cupcake is like all over her novel. Like she's talking about how good it is, but Cupcake just kind of thinks it's bad. Like she's like, it's just not good. Like I don't know what you want from me. But she comforts her anyway. So now and then eventually Ursula does email them back. She tells them, she's like, hey, like, would you can come over to my house and have dinner. And so they do. They go over to her house and have dinner. They meet her husband, who's really weird, and they talk to her. They also see a shed in the back, and the shed, they're not sure what's in the shed. They're very confused about what's in the shed, but they don't go look, even though I want to say Victoria tries to. And then they go to talk to her and they're like, we really need you. And she's like, sorry, I gotta choose myself. She also acts really annoyed here, which I think is so interesting because in the first book, she's so heavily on them. Like, she's so talking about how much she loves them and stuff. And here she really just doesn't want to be around them. But I find that interesting. And I think, honestly, that's probably how she's always been. It's just like the mental changes of it all. Also, in this they bring up a lot of Samantha's part of this book, which I forgot to bring up. She really like they like try to talk to her a few times and they try to text her and stuff, and she does not respond. She does not want to talk to them. She has no interest in speaking to them. She does not care about who they are as a person. So then they're talking to her. They're like please come back. She's like no, and they talk about the bunny to her that they saw, and she's like, oh, a bunny, keeping Howard like or some not Howard, sorry. The college, I can't think of what the college is called right now. The college's name alive, like you're really keeping the urban history alive. And they're like, what do you mean? Like, and she's like, sorry, and then she just kind of kicks them out of their house. So I forgot to mention, there's this whole section in this book where she talks about how the she talks about how they like just like he abuses her. Like they literally he's talking to or they're talking to Ursula or Frosco or whatever, and she's like he assaulted us, like blah blah blah, and she's like, well, how did he assault you? And they're like, and then Kira goes, oh, metaphorically, and they're like, and they all look at her and they're like, you mean not metaphorically? And then Kira really starts to feel herself losing like everything. Like she starts to be fully consumed by them. Like there's a whole section where she talks about how she can't even think without having the bunnies clouding her. After all this, they leave her Ursula's house, they go home, and the next day they meet for mini food at this mini restaurant that they go to a lot. In doing this, they are all talking. And keep in mind, there is still this thing between Kira and Coraline. However, Coraline develops this new thing for Victoria. She likes Victoria a lot, and she really likes Victoria. Like they like fight over her affection back and forth, which I find very interesting. The way that and Victoria talks about it later. She just doesn't care. Like she really enjoys the feeling of knowing that she has all this control over Coraline, and there's nothing that Kira can do about it. So Kira and all of them go to the mini restaurant. They're all sitting there talking, and Eleanor just gets up. She just gets up and starts walking, and they're like, um, bye. And then Victoria gets up, and then Coraline gets up, and then Kira gets up. And they even talk about Kira as being the littlest sister in the situation, which I find very interesting because she kind of has the least respect from all of them. They really all treat her like she's replaceable, like it doesn't matter who or where she is. They all sit there in the dinner or in the thing after they before they leave. They're really talking about what Frosco said. She talked about how they really need to hone in on their artistic interpretations or whatever, and they all sit there and act like they know what they're talking about because Eleanor tells them that they should know what they're talking about. None of them do. And then after they get up and leave, she just starts walking, and as they're walking, everyone's like, "Where?" Well, actually, Kira's like, "Where are we going?" Everyone else kind of knows. They're all going to the school. They're going to the Rose Garden. So they all go to the Rose Garden, and they just kind of sit there and wait. Um, and they're just like staring out, and they see a hole in the back of the garden, and they walk over to it, and they just start looking in it. They're trying to find out something. Coraline puts a cupcake in it. She's trying to get the bunny out to find them, and then Victoria just starts digging. Like she starts full hand like pulling the dirt out. Like she's really in there pulling the dirt out. And then the poets come over. I personally this part of the book kind of it was not my favorite, but the poets come over and they're talking and they start fighting. They're like, "Why are you digging in the ground?" And Jonah is there, and they do bring up the fact that Jonah's also real name is Jonah, which I think is an interesting detail. And then the poets leave after like some traded words or something. So the bunny, after they get in this fight with the poetry guys, the bunny just shows up. Like they all leave. Jonah's like, "Bye, like I'll miss you." Also, they bring up the fact that Coraline can't take criticism, which I think is hilarious. They were like, "Oh, you can't take criticism. Like we heard about like what you were saying to your professor, like all this stuff." And then essentially Coraline does not get she gets real angry. They all leave, and the bunny comes out of the hole. He's just sitting there. He also has I forgot to mention there's this like spot on his head. It's covered in blood. It's in like a heart shape, and there's tears in it too because everyone was crying, and since Coraline was cutting herself, it stained his fur with blood. So the bunny starts jumping, like it just starts leaving, and they all start following it, and it stops to turn around and look at them, and they all follow it into Coraline's attic. And once they get there, they're just like looking at it and they're wondering what are they supposed to really do. And then they just do it. Like they get there and they all start doing it. They start putting on TV, they start playing music, they start like they just do it all. And now they're sitting there with the bunny and it's just kind of staring at them, and they're just kind of looking back at it. And and then we switch to the Duchess's point of view. This is where it gets and this is when she really starts to explain herself. Which I think this whole like story has really needed. So she really starts to talk about who she is, and she brings up like that she kind of doesn't really like any of them, and she understands the power that she holds over all of them, and that she can really just do whatever she wants. And then you get a little bit into her childhood. She is actually the one with the powers, and her sister. You get a lot into her relationship with her sister, and she talks about how her sister really just doesn't like her, and then she brings up her sister is a surgeon, and she talks about how her sister isn't really doing anything important with being a surgeon because she does surgery, but she creates whole new humans, which is definitely a leap in judgment. And then basically what happens is they're all sitting there, and we get a little bit deeper into her point of view, and she talks about how she doesn't care. She just needs, this is what she wants the most. She wants the power to create, and that's what she finds the most interesting out of anything. and that really she kind of leaves them all in the dark. Like up until this point, no one really knows what's happening except for her. Like they're all just kind of going with what she's doing, and they're just going with it. So they all start they this is where the hive mind really starts to happen a lot. So in the book, they have this really combined hive mind where they literally just start reading each other's minds, which again, I don't know how I necessarily feel about that. It can be real lazy. Some people it can get real bad. This isn't the worst definitely that I've read, but I just don't really know if there's necessarily the greatest way to do that. But so they start reading each other's minds, and they all start feeling each other's feelings, which this part is very interesting. So they start like they're sitting in the middle. This bunny's in the middle of them. They're all sitting there, and they start like just talking, but they're in each other's minds, and they each take turns looking into each other's minds. Like they just really start like penetrating each other's souls. And Victoria here, when before it switches to Dutch's point of view, she talks and she says how she doesn't even want anyone knowing what she's thinking all the time. And they literally like start looking at each other, like they take turns, all three of them, and like digging into each other's souls, trying to figure out what they're hiding. And then from this, all of them start talking, and as they're talking, they're just really like they just continue going, and then it gets really intense. So starts getting really loud. The music starts looping, playing backwards. The lights start like changing, and and then the bunny explodes. It gets everywhere. It's all over everyone. And then there's a bunny ear that lands inside of Eleanor's lap, and she just kind of stares at it and starts talking into it, and it starts talking back to her. Well, kind of not really, but it starts talking back to her, and then she thinks about like what she can possibly do. She's like, what can I do better? Like there's got to be a better way to make this work. And then basically Eleanor and they're all covered in blood. Like it's and Coraline is like just screaming, just horrified, like talking about how she's a murderer, how like it's awful. And Kira's trying to comfort her. Eleanor walks over and smacks her in the face, and then smacks her again and tells her how she needs to grow up, basically, and that if she's not willing, she like basically to act like a grown woman. She's being like, you need to like pull yourself together. And then Eleanor just kind of picks up and leaves. She just walks out and leaves everyone there in the chaos. She literally, and then Victoria tries to follow her, and she's like, "Sorry, like I need to think about this myself." And then there's a lot of Eleanor talking about herself. She really like she's kind of like she's an awful person. She's made to be an awful person, but she's an awful person. She talks about how like, oh, like they'll be fine. It doesn't matter if they're. She literally is like, if they're traumatized, who really gives a shit? Because I got what I want. Um, so Eleanor's just she's kind of there. She's just like walking. She's talking to the moon. The moon starts talking back to her. And she's like thinking about like, well, what do I do now? Like, I feel like what am I supposed to do? But then she starts feeling like a failure, like a really bad failure, and they're all just like, okay, like I'm sorry, but she's like, I felt like a failure, and then later, I would like find out that I wasn't. Also, keep in mind, Eleanor has become a teacher, but not like a professional teacher, like a teacher of like a pseudoscience therapy class, like it's so funny the way it's described. And then they talk about how she they just go next day to the workshop. They're all going. They all show up and they all go to a different room because Eleanor feels dark. Like she feels like sick almost because it's not even because she feels bad about killing the bunny necessarily. She just feels like a failure because she couldn't turn the bunny into a human, which she also doesn't bring up to the other bunnies. They don't even know what she was trying to do. They just think she just slaughtered a bunny for no reason. And that's where I got. That's where I am right now. I'll report back on like page 300 probably. We'll see. Maybe I'll finish the whole thing, maybe not. But see you then. So I've officially made it 120 pages further into this book. I'm going to tell you what happens, and um I don't really know exactly what we were thinking, but you know, Sure. So, I believe where we left off is that Eleanor was like, she like left and she was walking, talking to the moon. So the next day, Eleanor goes to the workshop. They're all at the workshop. They go to the workshop and they're like, Eleanor's like, let's move. So they move to a new room. And this room has a glass view of the outside. So like where the garden is with the rabbit statue. And so they all sit away from Eleanor, right? Like they all just they do not sit with her. They sit on Samantha's side. And so now she's like, Alan starts digging into her poem, and all the bunnies start agreeing with her. They're like talking to her. They're being like, "We don't like your poem." Also, Coraline is still covered in blood. She is very much covered in blood, and her bob is done though. Like her makeup's done, bob's done, but hair is still covered in blood. And they're all kind of freaking out after what happened. But she looks out the window and she sees a guy like just jumping in her, and she's like, you know what, that's what I want. So she goes outside, and she goes and looks at him and she's like, hey, like, and he just kind of stares at her, and they start talking a little bit, but she notices that first of all he's wearing her dress. He's got on Caroline's pearls. Victoria has an arm tattoo right here of Frosco's book. He's got, mind you, Samantha's bangs. I don't know about all that. And we'll get into that. So she's got Samantha's bangs, and I believe Eleanor's face vibe. So Eleanor starts immediately talking to herself. She's like, there's no way that he's related to the other girls. He is mine, mine only, mine alone. And this guy's name, she asks him what his name is, and he says Atreus, which I could be saying wrong. If I'm saying wrong, I'm sorry. But I'm not versed in medication. But I believe it's like a pain medication he took out, and he's like, this is my name. So his name is Atreus. And she talks about how much she hates Alan. And Atreus decides, well, actually, he's going to kill Alan. So he gets up, he goes and tries to murder Alan. He starts running towards him, and he's getting in his car, and then the other three bunnies stand in front of her, and they're like, girl, what the is this? And she's like, oh, and then Jonah walks over, and he meets frickin' Atreus, and he's like, nice to meet you. And Atreus is very into Jonah. Like, so into Jonah, like he's down on the floor for Jonah. This should have been a sign, mind you. But so they're just kind of going for it, and so they just lie to Jonah. They're like, he's a foreign exchange student, yeah, like and Jonah's like, that's cool. And then they take him home. They're trying to lock him in Kira's basement. They're trying to put him in the basement. And so they're dragging him. Well, at first they're not dragging him, and he's walking with them. And then they're literally, this is I think the funniest part of this book. They're walking down the street, and he's like, "What are those?" Like pointing at the cars, and he's like pointing at a Subaru. And she's like, "That's what the poor people drive." And then he points at a bus, and they're like, "We don't ride buses. Buses are for poor people." And then they get her like halfway. They get him like halfway to the door, like, and then they just start ripping him. Like they start taking him. They put him up in the basement. And I think it's so funny the way they describe this in the book, because it's like, did we drag him up the floor? Yes. Did we sock him in the face? Yes. Did we lock the door after we threw him in there? Yes, we did. But is that really wrong? I just love that. I love that. Definitely a highlight of this book. It's only downhill. If you couldn't tell, I don't know how I'm feeling about this anymore, and we are only halfway. I don't want to read anymore. It's fine. It was definitely, it's not the worst. It's not the worst thing I've read. So now they have dragged him in there. They lock him in there. He just starts bloody murder screaming, and they're all downstairs just like thinking about what to do. And they're like, well, so one of the girls goes up there and she starts talking to him, and then she comes back down. I believe first one to go up is Kira, I want to say. Kira or Coraline. But she comes back down and she's like, since he's a combination of all of that, he knows everything. He knows all of their secrets. He knows everything that happened to them. And so Coraline goes up first, then Kira, then Victoria, then Eleanor goes up last. We don't see the three of them. We just hear that he knows it all. He knows everything they've done. Also, Caroline, she tries to get him to come stay with her. They're all like, why not? They're all like, no, like, we're not letting that happen. Which is rightfully so, because out of all the bunnies, Kira is definitely the most, like, sane in the head. And mind you, Kira goes. So, now, they're just, like, trying to decide what to do. Eleanor goes upstairs, she starts talking to him, and he calls her mother, and she's like she's just like speaking to him, and he like starts basically telling her he's not gonna love her, and she pulls out an axe, like pulls up the axe, and is about to literally murder him, and then goes back downstairs and talks to the girls, and they're like, well, what are we gonna do? So they devise a plan. This is where we get into the first meat of this book, like the real, like, I promise you, like half of what I read, that's like literally this section. So it's literally the girls just deciding what to do. Like they decide what they're gonna do is, first of all, they gag him. They literally like tie him up and gag him. And the way this is described is also funny because they're like, Samantha, did we gag you? Yeah. Did we do it to him too? Yeah. Does that make us bad people? I don't think so. I think we're good people in the end because, you know, and so they essentially lock him up and they start the revision process where they're just throwing literature at him. They never teach him how to read. They never even try. I'm going to give you little spoilers of stuff that we learn later just so I don't forget. He goes through it. This is where you really see the bunnies like sinister aspects because holy shit. So they lock him up, they make him watch like French movies, they give him books, they give him all kinds of things. He just starts eating and shitting on the books. And it gets so insane to the point where they start just recording like what he's eating and stuff. But so oh my god. It's just kind of a montage of them doing shit, and then we get to a point where they're downstairs, Caroline and Kira are sitting on the couch and Eleanor's with them. Victoria goes upstairs and she's up there for a long time, and this has become a big problem for them because they just assume that Victoria's having sex with him. Victoria's not having sex with him. Victoria's reading him poems and crying. Like that, it gets into it later. Like she's just sitting there sobbing to him. But Caroline's not doing that. So Caroline runs upstairs to stop him, and Victoria comes out of the room, and they're just like, she's like, oh, we had sex, and she's like, I know. But then you learn later in the book, which I'm just saying now so I don't forget, Caroline has been cutting him, writing her name on him with a razor. She's been trying to rape him, literally like trying to like find some way to sexually arouse him. She's been kissing him without his consent, just pushing her face on him. He's been trying to stop her. She just won't let him. Mind you, she's been doing all of this to him while coming for Kira for trying to have sex with him. There is a section in this part where it literally talks about how she would just oops him. Like she would grab his groin and stuff and just be like, oops. Are you shitting me? That's insane. Eleanor, we find out when she goes up there, she's just trying to teach him shit. So, and Kira wants to kill him. Kira really wants to kill him, and Kira has every right to want to kill him. Kira knows what should have been done, and Kira tries a few times, and they don't let her. Kira's the most sane person. Kira, as I said in my first Bunny book review, is the best character, and I stand 10 toes down on that. Well, the best bunny. But, so, they turn around after this little bickering argument. Guess who's not in the room? He's gone. Atreus, gone. Just gone. The window's broken. I think they literally say, we're so fucked. And so now, they're all sitting there arguing, and they find out that, that Victoria didn't tie him up well, and I shit you not, Eleanor just starts choking her out. Just tell her. And then she goes, I'll never forgive you for this. And they walk in the room, and first of all, the axe is missing. And second of all, there's a note on the wall, and it says, I'm going to kill Alan. Or it says, kill Alan, but he's on his way to kill Alan. And then we get, in my opinion, definitely a choice. It was definitely a strong choice, which I can appreciate a strong choice. but I don't know if it was necessarily the right choice for this book. So we switch perspectives, and you might ask who we're switching. We're switching perspectives to Atreus, obviously. They find his writings later, so it's just him writing, and he talks about meeting us, and his story is, I think he's so hilarious. Like, I really do. I think this is, like, besides the gagging part, this is so funny. Like, he'll be like, I don't understand why that happened, but this story starts, and he's like, Mother and them have been abusing me, so I just left. And then he has this pony, the same sparkle pony, and it talks to him, like, so much. Like, he talks to this pony all the time. Like, this is his only friend. And the axe. And the axe and him and the pony are all he got. He leaves. He walks down the street trying to get away from them. He hears them screaming, but he sees kids. Well, he describes as three little monsters. And so now he's in front of these kids. They ask him for candy. He starts to hand them his razor. Two of them run away. The third one just kind of sits there and looks at him. And he thinks, oh shit, this is definitely Alan. He pulls out his axe to go kill him. And then he hears them behind him. And then he turns around, the kid's gone. And his mother was screaming. And she's like, oh, like, you can't be doing that to strangers. Like, she's crying. Like, she's sobbing. She's being like, come here right now. Like, yeah. So Atreus is like, why did my friends leave me? Like, what the hell? Like, this is so weird. So he just decides to walk away. And he just keeps going. He sees a frat house. This is when the story... I'm retelling this to you right now. And in retelling this to you, I'm understanding how actually crazy this is. Because... I'm going to be real with you. I don't know what we're doing now. So we get to the frat house. He goes in the frat house. He's like partying with all these dude bro guys. And one of them comes up to him. He's like wearing like a raven thing, I think. And he's like, they start like winking at each other. And he's like, you're not gay though, right? And he's like, no. And so they go upstairs, I'm presuming to have sex. But there was a friend up there, so I guess they don't. And he goes, oh yeah, Alan the professor. And he goes, your name's Alan? He goes, yeah, like on accident, like messing his words up. So when I tell you, there is another friend on the couch, mind you, you're not ready. He just pulls out an axe and cuts his head off. Oh. Okay. Bye, I guess. However, in the book, he describes it as an oopsie because he goes, his name was Tyler, and he's like, oh, oops. And his head's like rolling down the stairs. And he's like, welp, guess I gotta go. So he literally just like jumps out the window. Okay, I'm gonna mentally prepare you for this part. I need you to hold on with what I'm about to tell you because there is a lot and it is gonna be a lot and you're gonna be like, what the hell's happening? Just trust that I am telling you verbatim what's happening in the story. So he jumps out the window. He lands on the grass, and he's like, girl, what the hell? And he had this buddy mask that he was wearing. He throws it on the ground. A fire just appears, destroys it. Okay, bye. And he just gets these memories of being a rabbit, which, keep in mind, when he was locked up, the girls were like, tell me about being a rabbit. Tell me about this. Tell me about that. Also, since he remembers everything, right, we learned something about Eleanor. She applied to med school with her sister, but she got rejected. And then her father called in a favor to get her into Warren. So she never wanted to be an artist. She's just kind of bullshitting it, which is why she's asking him, in quotes, to tap the wound. She's trying to get him to write stuff for her so she can pass it off as her own. Which I think is, I love that Eleanor's not actually talented. That's like peak. That's great. That's great. But now we were outside. So he's sitting there in the grass. He's having memories of being a rabbit or whatever the fuck. And you're not ready. So prepare yourself. Jonah walks up. And you're like, girl, Jonah. He walks up. They start talking. He's like, cool to meet you, blah, blah. He's like, where are you headed next? She's like, I don't know. And then he's like, can I come? So he just goes with Jonah. They just start walking. Also, this is where this book pissed me off. And I'm going to talk about it right now. So we're with Jonah. We walk into this poetry bar. Like, we walk to the poetry bar. They actually, I forgot to say, they smoke cigarettes and they do some sort of blue pill. I don't know what it is. It doesn't say. They just do a bunch of drugs. So now they're in this poetry bar. And mind you, Okay, Jonah has always been an interesting character, and it doesn't surprise me that he's bisexual, but, but, it's gonna piss me off later. So they're holding hands, they're like walking in, Jonah starts blushing at him, right? Obviously signs of a man liking another man. Um, but they go in, they do the poetry thing, they all start reading their poetry. They're like, and I love, this is such a bare minimum. This is so bare minimum, but these days it holds on. I love that in this book that there's actual consequences for him killing that guy. Like the cops are like lurking everywhere and stuff. And that sounds so dumb, but after reading The Fisherman, that's peak. That's some of the best shit I've ever read. So now they're like, "Oh no, there's a killer on the loose." Like they walk into the poetries. All of the poetry guys are dicks, obviously. And they're like, "You don't even know like this and this." I don't know. And Jonah's like friends with them, I guess, and they're like, "Who's your friend?" And they like, I don't know, they just like weirdly accept him, and they're like, "Is that axe real?" Keep in mind, it has been said that it's an axe murderer. I don't know. But so now we Jonah goes and gets shots. He comes back, and they all read their poetry. And Atreus is like sobbing at Jonah's because he's just like fucking in love with him. Because Atreus, mind you, is gay. Um, but so now, okay, sorry, I'm just like mentally preparing. So they're like, go read there, Atreus. Like, why don't you read poetry? Because they don't know what he does. Because he's like not a fiction, but he's not a poetry guy either. And so they just like, they're like, okay, go read. So he goes up there and he has nothing to read. So instead, he goes and grabs a bunch of papers and throws them on the table, and then takes takes tissues from this lady who's been sniffing the entire time. Just picks them up barehanded, throws them on the table again, and then just lights it all on fire. I don't fucking know. And so now the whole bar is on fire. Now everything's burning down. Jonah walks out. And the poetry guys fucking ate this shit up. They're loving it. They're like screaming, cackling, being like, "Oh my god, like this is great!" Like, and I'm not down with poetry like that. But I would assume that they have a little bit more respect for themselves. So now we have freaking. They're outside the bar, and he walks out and he's like, "What did I do, Jonah?" As the bar's burning behind him, which I do think is kind of funny. But you know, oh my god. So I don't know any other way to put this. So him and Jonah are sitting there, and he turns to Jonah and they kiss. Period. We love the representation. This is the part where I start hating this book. Then he brings up Samantha. First of all, that's not something a human would do. And I know that's like a criticism that people use all the time, but you're not going to, as you're actively kissing someone, you're not going to tell them who you are in love with. That's just not something you'll do. People say they will, you wouldn't in a real situation. And if you think you would, you're wrong. Second of all, I don't know if I've already mentioned this, but they kiss right, and then after, they literally are like, well, we don't know if it was real or not, but I lived my life with Jonah. Okay, either commit to gay characters being gay, or don't. You didn't have to write this. You didn't have to say that they were queer. You decided to put that in, and you added that in this book. There was no necessity to say that they were queer, and you didn't have to put that in. But because you're too scared to write queer characters, and Mana Watt, I'm disappointed, girl. Like, girl, you know I stan, but I don't. This isn't really my vibe. Oh, so they just like they kiss, and then he's like, I don't really know. You think that's bad? Then they proceed to fuck, and I don't mean like something like just like a little page. I shit you not, 4 pages of just going at it. Just literally, if I told you what they did, YouTube channel gone. Me and my 14 views disappeared off this platform because holy shit. And then you're just like, okay, but because it feels like the book genuinely forgot that it was trying to have this side plot line. It feels like we were reading two separate entries because all of a sudden this is all real. And then they're looking there and they're like, "Oh, but this doesn't even feel real." I'm going to be Mono Wad. Look at me in my eyes. I need you to stop with this bullshit. Either they are or they aren't real. I've read this story for at least probably, I think I'm on 600 pages now. Either I'm done with this ambiguous bullshit. Either you need to find a way to write that fits into this like idea of it not being real without having directly tell me. I'm done with this. Stop directly telling me this. The metaphors in this book have become so heavy-handed that it started to piss me off. The charm has kind of wore off, and I know in my last book I was like, I don't even give a shit. I'm starting to give a shit. I'm about 240 pages in this book, about halfway through. I care now. Stop with the heavy-handed metaphors. Give me something more interesting. Give me something more. So you're just like, okay. So they wake up in Jonah's bed. Mind you, if you haven't seen my video on the first, go watch it. Mind you, Jonah is like he was like in the first book, he's like a straight guy with like, I guess he was never straight. That's not fair. But he was like portrayed as straight. Like he was in love with Samantha. In this book, we throw away a few things. First of all, I start disliking Jonah. I'm going to be for real. Like, not in like a the character develops kind of way, in a way that it's pissing me off. Because mind you, this is a fucking, what's it called? Like a prelude. This is a prelude to the first book. All of this happens before the events of the first book. Because technically this is like the real story. This is what actually happened, and the first book is Samantha's rendition of it. Which is why I'm so confused in this book that we are trying to do this ambiguous. It's supposed to be the real story. It's supposed to be what actually happened. I don't understand why we're keeping it ambiguous. I get that there's a magical aspect, and I love the magical aspect. That's the reason why I read these books. But I think you either need to make it ambiguous or not. I'm done with this halfway. You can't, either they kissed or they didn't. Because especially when it comes to queer representation, you need to decide if you're going to do it hard or not. I don't want no Stranger Things bullshit. Give me something that is concrete, or don't give me anything at all. Also, this happens multiple times in the book. I'm just like getting into part of my review here. I'm just like baffled. So from here they go, from here they wake up in Jonah's bed. Jonah's in his dress for some reason. I know that's a reference to the first book, but Jonah gets ready and he tries to follow him. He's like, "Can I come with you?" He's like, "No, I gotta go to school. Like, I'm still in love with Samantha." Why is Jonah so heavy-handed in this? In the first book, I know it's Samantha's perspective, but in the first book, he's not that heavy-handed in the way that he likes her. And that was something I so appreciated. And I understand that this is a transition between books. This is how he probably actually has always been. But why make a likable character unlikable? Especially because Jonah is such a highlight in these books. I just don't know. And I heard there's a third one coming out, and unless I get like bombarded, I will not be reading the third one. Cause, girl, I would say, okay, let me just finish this and then I'll get into how I feel. So now we're at Jonah's house. They leave. He's like, "Oh shit, I actually have a class." And Jonah's like, "There's gonna be police everywhere." So they walk to class. Keep in mind, he heard Alan was going to be at school. That's why he's going, because he wants to kill Alan still. Because part of the bunnies is him, and he just wants to kill Alan. And the bunnies downplay this. They're like, "No, we don't actually want to kill him." Yeah, they do. And so now we have now he's at school, and him and Jonah goes into his class, and he just sits there waiting for Jonah. Also, all the cops start coming for him, and they're like, "We love you," because everyone loves him. I don't know. Here's what I think. I think where I am at right now, it's either going to get a whole lot better or it's going to get a whole lot worse. I need Mono Awad to lock in because this has to get better. As of right now, I would say it's a 4-star because there are interesting parts of it. But if it gets any worse, like, I don't know where we're headed. Like, it's just, I don't, I don't think this needed to be written, honestly. And I see people say that all the time, and I was hoping I was gonna disagree, but I see it. Like, I don't know if this ever needed to be written, to be honest. It, it's, it's definitely there. So I'll report back when I'm another 120 pages in, and see you then. Okay, so I'm now another 120 pages into Bunny, and I like, okay, I feel a little bit better, but also a little bit worse at the same time. It, it's just kind of confusing. But I'll get into it. So let's start the summary. So basically, where we left off was that they were at the campus, I believe, and him and Jonah were like, they walk in and they see that everyone discovered that, like, all the dead bodies and stuff. But from here, Jonah goes to his class. But before he can go to his class, him and Atreus kiss again. I know, and it was supposed to be like this. Oh, I'm in love with Samantha. I'm not a fan of that. I'm not a fan that he's in love with Samantha, kind of, but not really. And then all of a sudden, he's just decided that he's like, you know what I mean? Like, he's just no, that's like his vibe, I guess. So he kisses him. He goes to, what's it called? He goes to class. I don't know why it took me so long. And then from there, Atreus decides that he's sad and he wants to follow him into the building, but he doesn't. He goes to the garden, our bunny garden that we've been talking about for a while now. So he goes to the garden and he looks and he's like sitting there and he sees the bunnies. He jumps into the bushes really fast and he looks and he finds this bunny and it looks like the frat boy he killed. It has an eye patch in the same way that the frat boy he killed had an eye patch, and he's just kind of like weirded out by it, but he's like really like talking to it, like he's speaking to it a lot, and he's trying to hide it. And the bunnies walk out and they're talking about how like angry they are and how they feel like failures for losing Atreus. And then they go and they Eleanor sees him, by the way. She looks into the thing and sees him, but I don't know why she doesn't say anything that hasn't been explained yet. If it isn't explained, that's gonna piss me off. Because again, there's so much of this book that just didn't need to be written. And it's not even like, it's just too long. And there's parts of it that just feel like, oh, we're just adding another plot line. Like, we just decided that this is the plot line that we want to add. So from here, they're all outside. Vic sees this bunny in the bushes, and she goes and gets it. She picks it up out of the bushes, and Atreus kind of hides, and Vic takes the bunny and she walks away. Then Jonah walks out, and he's like, Jonah, like, what the hell? And so Jonah walks out with Sam, though, and they're talking and they're having a conversation about the school. And he's basically being like, yeah, like, that's cool. Like, he offers her a cigarette and she basically denies him and just kind of laughs in his face, which is so funny because that's the way that Atreus even brings it up, that he's like treating her like in the same way that he treats Atreus. Also, I forgot to mention this little interjection. I did get a new camera and I did get new lighting, so we no longer feel like we're in a hospital. Also, if the camera is messed up, I'm sorry. I will figure it out. Okay, back to the story. So now he's like getting really sad. So they leave, they go back inside. And he gets up and he goes to a bar. And he goes to this bar, and honestly, I would say this is one of, if not the best part of this book. It shows that Mona Awad knows her characters. Like, she actually is aware of the world that she's in. So basically what happens is that he goes to a bar, and there's these two guys at the bar, and they're talking to him. But they know what he is. They know that he's a draft, or that's what the bunnies call the bunny guys. They're drafts or hybrids or whatever. He knows that he's one of them. So then from there, what happens is they're like, oh, I bet, like, he's sitting at the bar talking to these guys, and they're like, oh, I bet you he's a rabbit, or I bet you he's a stag, or something like that. And they like make fun of him, and he like gets kind of sad, but then he's like, oh, like, he's talking about how he has to kill Alan, and he like brings up that he's gonna kill Alan, and they're like, well, I hope you won't kill us because our names are Alan. So he does whip out an axe and kills both of them. And they're both dying, and then he like he leaves their bodies there. And he goes in the backyard of like the back of the bar, and he finds that there's a bunch of bunnies there, like a bunch of they're just breeding bunnies, which shows that obviously they also have the power of doing it, which makes me feel a little bit better about this book because it shows that they aren't actually as special as they think they are, because the book spends so much time talking about how not special the bunnies are or whatever, like how they're like just normal people, because the book wants you to make fun of them. It wants you to see them as crazy. The book wants you to see these bunnies as like these all-powerful beings, essentially, like that they're so strong or whatever, but it also spends so much time breaking their characters down, so it doesn't make sense to have them have this strength inside of like themselves, which is why I love that it broke down this by showing that there are other people in the world who have the same power that they also have. Um Also, after this, basically, he gets up from the bar and he just walks to a ditch, and he hears sirens and stuff, and he's like kind of drunk at this point, and he falls asleep. And he wakes up to people picking him up and dragging him, and he's just assuming it's the bunnies, but he really has no like willpower left at all, so he just kind of gives up and just kind of lets them take him. He wakes up in a bed that he does not know, and he's always talking. He like talks about how he's expecting it to smell like cupcakes or something, but it just smells like freaking like what's it called? It just smells like dirt, is what he said. He describes it as it smells like Jonah, but not really. And he's in the poet's room, and he's in a bed, and they're all surrounding him writing stuff, and they essentially tell him that he's their muse, like he's going to help them create their next project. And the thing I do love about Idris in this book is he is so like used by everyone. He's not considered a real human being, which I think is a very good trope for the book. But I'm gonna say it. We didn't need this. We didn't need this plot line. We never would have needed this plot line. It is so in the middle of absolutely nothing. It provides almost nothing to the story. And we could have completely cut this and just moved. We did not need this. Like, there's like 100 pages of this. We did not need this. This was not necessary. It never needed to be in the book. I don't understand why it's in here. So essentially what happens is they are like, you're our muse. They basically tell him he can have whatever he wants. He just gets like very fucked up. Like he gets like blackout drunk like 24/7. Like he's just drinking. They're like musing him. They're writing their poems. And they tell him that they're having their god, essentially. Well, he describes it as their god, but I don't even remember his name because he's really not important. But he's like this big poetry hotshot guy that's coming to like talk about the poems and stuff. So they're like, okay, like they're preparing, and then they fix up their poems and they take him with them. They go to a poetry bar, and he walks in, and they're all sat waiting for someone to come talk, and he walks over to this guy who he describes as homeless, and I know that's for the point of the book. I don't really know if that's a great description of someone that is not like well kept. Like that just feels kind of demeaning to me, but to each their own, I guess. So he talks about this guy, and he like is talking to him. He's stealing cookies and stuff, and he's like, "What the hell are you doing?" And he goes and sits down, and then that guy gets up and is the poetry guy. So the guy who he thought was like stealing or whatever, he's the one who's doing the poetry reading. He reads some poetry. It really does not matter. Like we do not get any semblance of the poetry that he is reading. But you know, and honestly, I'm okay with that. This book doesn't really need to be any longer than it is. And so now we move to the dinner. They go to dinner. They're all sitting at dinner. They're all like talking about poetry shit. I don't really know. And they are, what's it called? They are all talking, and he asks for the gold liquid, which is like vodka, is what he's asking for. Like he's asking just for vodka. And I don't know why he refers to it as the golden liquid the entire time. I do not know anything about alcohol. So I'm assuming it's because there is that one drink that has the gold flakes in it or whatever. But he's just asking for like hard vodka, and he gets like different versions of it throughout the story, but he just does shots. Like Atreus just starts doing shots. And um, the poetry guy, what's it called? He does shots with him, sees the bunnies walking in. And when Atreus sees the bunnies walking in, he gets up and he walks out and he starts going outside, because when he sees them walking in, they're with four other guys, four new bunnies, and he runs out and he goes outside to the other side of the park, and then he turns around and the poetry guy follows him. And they're like, he's like understanding, like he's like talking about how he feels like he's in the wrong body because he's a fucking bunny. And and the poetry guy's like, yeah, I understand it. Like, I understand you. And then the poetry guy just, like, gets on all fours and starts digging in the dirt. So Atreus just kind of does it with him, and they dig a giant hole, and then he starts screaming poems into the dirt, and he's like, I'm Alan, but he's not saying that. He's saying something else. But that's what Atreus hears. And so he pulls out the axe and cuts his head off and puts his head in the dirt, and his head disappears. And then he turns around and he sees Jonah. And him and Jonah are, like, like talking, I believe. Like Jonah walks over to him, they're talking, and he's like, "Oh, I'm here for like the poetry thing," and I believe they kiss again. And then it goes in this weird sexual fantasy about him and Jonah. I'm so done with them, by the way. Either make them endgame or don't, because you're pissing me off. And I understand it'll never work, blah blah blah. I don't know. But I also don't really know why Atreus is in this book, to be so honest with you. It could have been a separate novel. But, so basically what happens is that they kiss. He's like, oh, I have to go to the poetry thing. And there's a bunny in the hole now. He's like looking at the bunny. And he confesses to Jonah everything that he like has done. Like he literally tells him start to finish all the murders, everything. And Jonah's like, you're into some weird performance art shit. Like he just doesn't believe that that's what actually happened. And he tells him, he's like, well, don't kill the bunny. And then Jonah gets up and walks towards the bar, and Atreus is walking with him. And then before he walks in, he goes, "I can't." And he doesn't explain it, which is very convenient for the narrative. But I mean, I don't know. He just like leaves, and Jonah is like sad. He goes into the bar and he runs, and he sees this bunny who is obviously the poetry guy in a bunny form, because we also saw that with a frat guy in the bunny form. Also, he sees the frat guy. One of the four men is the frat guy in human form after being turned back from a bunny. So from that, he chases this bunny. He like runs all the way forward to this bunny, and he follows it through neighborhoods and stuff, and he ends up at Frosco's house. And he walks it. He basically it follows him all the way to the shed. Like he follows the bunny all the way to the shed, and he goes around her backyard, and he sees that there is Frosco sitting in the middle. It doesn't tell you it's explicitly Frosco, but you obviously know because of the neighborhood description. So it's Frosco, and so he goes and he sits down, and she opens her eyes and she looks at him and she's like, "Who the hell are you?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm this," and she's like, and she starts getting that weird attraction that everyone has to him, and she essentially locks him in her shed, and she's like, "You're gonna be my muse." Like everyone wants him to be their muse. And so the poem guys pull up to Frosco's, and they're like, "Have you seen Lenny?" That's his name, poetry guy. "Have you seen Lenny?" And she's like, well, because Lenny's staying with Frosco, I forgot to mention that. And she's like, Lenny's fine, because obviously he's in bunny form in the shed. She doesn't say that, though. And she's like, it's okay, like, he loved your poems, he'll be back. And the poem guys turn around, they leave. And so now she's in the shed talking to Atreus, and we switch completely. So now we switch back to the bunnies. And they talk about how he's basically a liar, he's lying on them, he wrote the story, it's dumb. And now we switch to the perspective of all four of them at once, which is just, you don't really know who's speaking at any time, but it's kind of just all four of them. They talk about using a passing stick. They don't do that. I don't understand why put that in the book if you're not going to have them switch perspectives like you did. Don't bring up the passing stick if you're not going to actually do it, and if you're just going to have them all talk at once. But, so basically what happens is they talk about their life. So after Atreus left, they kind of like had a breakdown. Like they just started making a shit ton of bunnies, like because they like couldn't get anything like him. They made those four. The one bunny that is the frat boy, they made him. They made a shit ton. They filled Elise's or Eleanor's entire basement full of bunnies. And the reason they were at that dinner that night is because they took those four out on a test drive. And the problem with all of these bunnies is they can't have sex with them because they don't have genitalia or hands. And so they took these bunnies out, and they all were like sitting there. And also, I forgot to mention, Atreus sees these bunnies in the window, and they all turn and look at him. There's a section where the bunnies talk about the bunny guys, like the four of them. They're like talking about how they're just looking out the window and they can't see what they're seeing. So the bunnies are like dealing with that, and then they're all like kind of like doing their dinner shit, and then they start screaming, just screaming. The bunnies have to take them out, and they drive them essentially home, where they all sit on the couch and they're screaming the whole way home, and they're in Kira's house, and Kira has the axe. Kira's been killing a lot of these bunnies, and so what happens is they bring the four of them in the basement, they get them real drunk, the four bunny guys, and then they have them sit there watching The Bachelorette while they wait for their turn. So what happens is basically the freaking Kira is just murdering people upstairs. Like, she's pulling out the axe, she's just killing them all. And they describe being able to hear the sounds of her killing them, but she refuses to let the other bunnies, like, ignore the sound of her murdering them because she wants them to understand what the toll it's taking on her. And she talks about how she doesn't want to kill them anymore, but they're like, oh, you're the best at it, blah, blah, blah. Because, like, her dad's Irish, I guess, and he taught her how to use the axe. I don't know. So they're like they kill three of them, and they go to kill the frat boy bunny guy, and they go up to him and they're like, you need to go upstairs, and he starts freaking out, and he like hides in the corner, and he's like, no, like please, I can't have it happen again, and like I can't be killed by an axe again. And they're like, girl, what do you mean? And they contemplate just ending him right there. Like they're like, oh, we're just gonna kill him now because it'll be easier than if we have to do it later. But they don't. They listen to him, and he's like, I know where Atreus is. And they all like get so excited, and he leads them all the way to Frosco's house. And then Frosco's tiny ass dog comes out and it chases him down the street. And I'm pretty sure it actually kills him, but we'll get there. And they knock on Frosco's door, and she's clearly pissed off. And so they're like, where, what, we just ended up here. And she's like, oh, come in, blah, blah, blah. And they're talking to her about their work, and they admit everything to her. And she knows it's true, but she's just kind of bullshitting to them because she wants to keep Atreus, and she does not want to have to give up her muse. So they're like, oh my god, this happened, and we really, like, we don't know what to do. And she's like, well, I think your writing's dog shit. And they're like, well, it's not writing. And she's like, well, I think your characters are bad. I think you need to rewrite this all. It's sloppy, it's messy. Just wait till I come back for the next semester, and we'll deal with it. And she basically calls them stupid. She's like, I don't think you're good writers, and I think you need to get help. Which is kind of funny because she eats them, like, devours them, and they all kind of start crying, which is such a juxtaposition than the first book, where she loves them so much with everything in her, like, her soul loves them. So that happens, they leave, and I'm trying to think. Oh, they leave, and they notice that there's something going on in the shed, though, while they're there, and they're like, what the f***'s in there? And she's like, I don't know, get out. She basically kicks them out. And then her dog comes home with like clothes in her mouth, clothes in its mouth. Obviously, the dog killed the frat boy bunny. Um, and so they go on winter break. It's just a time jump essentially. So it's like a montage. There's a lot of montages in this book. So it's them turning in their final papers. It's them doing all kinds of stuff, like just like they hand all the papers, and then they have their end of year party, which is where we meet Samantha. Samantha's essentially crazy, which we already knew from the first book. She's just like talking to the air, like, and she goes up to the lion or Alan or whatever, and she goes and she's like, hey, like, will you sign these books? And Alan's talking to them, he's being kind of a dick, and he's like, good luck. And he like walks away. Him and Sam go into his office and he signs the books. There's a bunch of protesters outside that are protesting against axe related violence, and they're like banging on the windows and stuff. They're like, you guys are the reason that people are dying in this town, blah blah blah. And then we time jump again. We time jump again, and it's just them. It's them on winter break. It's basically, well, actually, before we time jump to their winter break, the thing that happens is that the bunnies are wrapping up. So they're killing some of the bunny guys. They're putting the rest of them in Eleanor's basement with like food, water, and then they go on winter break. They're out. They all leave. It's just stories about how their parents hate them. Essentially, it's really not important to the novel. It's stuff we already have been told multiple times. So after all this, they come back. All the bunny guys are huddled like naked in a circle, like trying to keep warm with like pixie stick dust around them. They set that all up, and then it's the first day of the semester, so they go to the cave, and Frosco comes in, and Samantha's there too. And when Frosco walks in, they're like, what the? And she's younger, she's glowing, her hair's better, everything about her has improved significantly, and they're very confused by this. They're like, what do you mean? We saw you, you were looking awful, and now you look good. She walks in, and she gives them this little gist. She doesn't even try to help them. She like, it's literally like a 10-minute class period. She's like, okay, I'm done. And they're like, well, what are we, like, the bunnies freak out. Samantha's out there. Samantha, the minute she says class is over, Samantha's gone. She's done. She's out the classroom. But the bunnies are like, well, what are we learning in this class? Like, if you're not going to teach us, I'm confused. He's like, but I really hope you will attend my art exhibition in the fall. And she like walks out, and the bunnies are like, well, now what the hell are we supposed to frickin' do? They leave, and they're like, okay, let's go make some more bunny guys. The problem is they can't. They start to freak out. They're chasing bunnies down the street. They're trying to get them. They can't explode any bunnies. They're having such like an issue with it. They actually go to frickin' Petco to go buy bunnies. This is where I left off in the book. I only have like 120 pages left, and when I tell you I'm kind of done with this book, when I tell you like I don't know. It's too long. It's way too long. I'm very excited to finish this. it's literally like 500 pages for what? For why? Why did we need this to be 500 pages? It didn't need to be 500 pages. We could have cut so much out of this, but I only have about that much left. So I'll come back to you once I've done that and once I'm back. Hello. So I've officially finished We Love You Bunny by Mona Awad, and I'm here to give you the summary. And um I, I don't know. So basically where we left off was that the bunnies were like buying bunnies from Petco because they like lost their magic and shit. And now what happens is that the bunnies they go back to workshop. They go back to workshop to see Frosco, and they're like, "Hey, um they're just like kind of talking to her. They do workshop and they leave, and they're all crying. Like they're sobbing in the garden, and they see Frosco running off. She's like skipping. She goes and picks up a dandelion, and she walks away. So they obviously follow her home, and they show up at her house, and they're like, "We know that you have him with you. We know that he is in your house, and we are aware." And she basically is like, also she's holding Lenny while she's talking to them, and she's basically like, "No, like you're actually crazy. Like I think you're genuinely insane, and you need to get help." And then she looks at Eleanor and she tells her, and she's like, it's kind of embarrassing that you need other people to create. Like that's weird." So from there, what happens is we switch perspectives. So now we are at Atreus's perspective, and he has been working for Frosco. She's been making him tap the wound, and has been trying to get him to make stuff for her. Basically, what happened is that now he's in her house. She basically took his clothes. She like made him freaking. So yeah. So basically, she's just like she took his clothes. She made him like just wear a skirt all the way around the house. She talks to him about how she basically hates her life. Like she's always being like, yeah, like I hate them. I really do hate them. Like she's like, everyone hates me. They think I'm worthless. They think that I don't understand art anymore. And she talks about how he's going to fix that. Like basically he's writing this book for her, and she's so excited for him to write this book. And essentially what happens is we kind of go through a montage of him writing and her talking to him. So basically what happens is he is writing for Frosco, and he doesn't know what to write. She wants him to write about being a like animal, like, and he just doesn't know what to do. And Lenny got turned into a bunny. So Lenny and him are like best friends now. And Lenny leads him upstairs, and he shows him his writings, and he's like, "Look, like," well, he doesn't say it, but he kind of does. He's like, "Take those and write them." So he essentially Atreus is just copying them down and changing them into prose. And that's what all he's showing Frosco. Like she doesn't see majority of his book. Like he will not show her anything, and she's like just kind of angry. Like she's not having a good time. And so basically, what happens is he's in the garden, which he said is his favorite place, and he gets into some things with himself. And then he hears the bunnies coming, and Frosco walks in, and she's like real flustered. Like she's like, "Oh, like you're so hot," and she keeps trying to flirt with him. He's not having it because, remind you, he's gay. So he goes upstairs and hides, and the bunnies, and he's like looking at them as they're walking out. And we already got to that part where she's like basically telling them they're dumb, and she tells him to come to the show, and he's looking out the window, and she stares up at him and tells him basically to get down. And so when he was getting with himself, someone saw him in the garden, and he just kind of they just ignore that. So basically what happens now is that he's trying to write. So everyone's asleep in the house, and he goes into Frosco's separate room, and he starts writing. And on the wall he notices that there's pictures of her, and those pictures are of her when she went to Warren. And it's her with bunnies, it's her with axes. So obviously she was creating things with bunnies and axes. And he's trying to write in there, and she comes in, and he's like, he flips his book because he writes upside down. So writes upside down in the back of the book so she won't find it. And so he's sitting there, and she walks in basically like in a sheer dress, and is playing the harp. And then she gets it from playing the harp and tells him, she's like, "I need to see the book." Because keep in mind, the show that she's trying to do is tomorrow. So she's trying to see the book, and he just won't let her. And she gets really angry, and she's like, "Let's watch a movie." So they go to watch a movie, and she tries to take the book while they're watching a movie, and he just won't let her do it. And she gets up and walks out. And he goes back and goes to sleep, and Lenny goes to sleep next to him, and he wakes up to her sitting at his desk reading the book. And she starts just hysterically sobbing. She is so sad. She's like, "Oh, we're so Like, we're not, like, and so she's crying, and she's like, tell me I'm yours. Like, tell me that you're mine. And here's where this book pissed me off. Because, mind you, the bunnies have already come in and told her that he's theirs. Why would she think that he is hers if the bunnies have explicitly told her that they made him? That makes no sense. That's a blatant plot hole in this story. But he's like, yeah, I am yours. And she pulls out an axe, is about to kill him. And then they hear mob. The protesters are mob. Like, they're all mobbed up, right? And this is another plot hole. Because in this book, it literally talks about how no one gives a shit about the dead people anymore. What the f do you mean there's protesters? There is literally no one left. No one cares about the dead people. You brought that up so many times, and you're just throwing that away. So essentially what happens is that she just goes, like, she goes downstairs, and she's like, stay here. He does not stay there. He follows Lenny into the forest, and they see Alan there, like the real Alan. And this also pissed me off, because I read the first bunny book for my book club, and we were talking about how Alan really isn't much of a character. Like, he's there, he's part of the book. Okay, so I read the first bunny book for my book club, right? He's in the book, he's like part of it, but his characterization is not specific. We don't know about Alan. There is literally no descriptions of him and his personality, how he acts. The only thing we get is he's kind of a dick. And, like, that he kind of messes with Samantha. But he's really not fully developed in any way. And so what I'm about to say is not going to make sense, because it doesn't make sense. So he goes in the forest, he sees Alan. Mind you, they never explain why Alan's in the middle of the forest. There are so many times in this book where people just conveniently show up. You know what? Sure. What the hell, sure. So he sees Alan, and he's like, I gotta kill you. And Alan's like, why? And this is the most blatant drop of information in this book. Holy hell. You know, I guess. So Alan's like, basically, he's like, you can't do that. You have meaning, you're a person. And basically, Atreus breaks down and starts talking like the bunnies to Alan. He's like, basically the bunnies talk through him, which doesn't make sense because that's never happened before. That's not a thing that happens, but I guess it just happens for this section of the book. And Alan's like, well, like, you know, like, you gotta do this, like, you got this. Why would he not kill Alan? He's killed so many people in this book, and Alan's just, he's just like giving up. He's like, no, like, actually, I don't want to kill Alan now. He's killed, I think, like 4 people to kill Alan. But now he's just all of a sudden decided that he just doesn't want to kill Alan. He just doesn't feel like it. Oh, okay. And Alan basically is like, you're a creation, only your creator can kill you and turn you back into a bunny, and when creations kill other creations, they become bunnies, which makes sense why every time he kills someone, they become a bunny. And Alan takes the axe and he throws it into the lake. And him and Lenny are there still, and Lenny hops all the way to the showcase, because now we're at the day of the showcase. I think this is arguably the strongest part of this book. I loved this part of the book. So he goes in the back door of the theater and goes and sits in the square where Frosco told him to sit. And he puts on this bunny mask, and he's sitting there, and all of a sudden the smoke machine starts and there's grass everywhere around him, and Frosco starts her section, and she's reading, and she's like, I've tapped the wound. I've successfully done it. And she's always talking about how there's people that like she's talking about her career's dead. She's like, I'll have people from New York here, like, they're gonna love me. There's no one in the audience. It's just people from the school. Like, there's like a few people in the back, but it's not full. And basically what happens is that Frosco's like talking to them, and she's being like, oh, like, I've developed this, like, this is my work. And he's sitting behind her, and she starts reading, and she's reading Lenny's poems. And the poets in the corner get up and they're like, you're literally a plagiarist. Like, you're literally reading someone else's poems. And she's like, no, like, I wrote these. And even if plagiarism is a thing, like, who cares? They're literally just words. Words are broken down. So everyone starts chanting at her, and they're like, we hate you. Like, we actually hate you. And she's like, well, I'll show you something cool. So she picks up this axe, and she throws the book on the floor. So basically, Atreus is trying to get his book back, and because that's his whole story. That's his life story. And she goes and crawls for it, or he goes and crawls for it. And she picks up the axe and she's about to kill him. She picks up the axe and starts swinging, and she barely misses and hits the ground. And everyone starts screaming. And then at this point, when she misses the ground, a mob forms. Everyone wants him. Everyone's going for him. They're all coming in. And then all of a sudden, the doors open. and thousands of bunnies come in, they disrupt everything, and then the lights go out. I love that. That is great. That is such a great way to build tension. 10 out of 10, amazing. Um, and it doesn't get better, but that is like the peak of this book. So after this, essentially what happens is that we just continue. So the lights go out, and I forgot to mention before this, Lenny tells him, because Lenny and him talk sometimes, it's like a weird plot device. Lenny and him talk, and Lenny's like, oh, I'll protect you. So that's like why the bunnies are there. So he sneaks out. He runs out of the room, and he runs all through a bunch of doors. He's at this point where he's in this room, right? And he walks in, and he's looking at these mirrors, and it's just a room full of mirrors, and he sees himself a bunch of times, and then he turns around, and the bunnies are there. And the bunnies are like losing it. They can't tell which version's him. They start banging their heads into the glass. They start making out with the glass. The glass is breaking. They're still touching it. They're bleeding everywhere. And then Kira, still the best character, mind you. Kira picks up the axe, right? And since she's picking up the axe, she starts to swing on him. She's trying to kill him. She like fully goes for it, and all the bunnies are screaming. They're like, no, you can't kill him, like that will, like, you're ruining it. And what happens is she barely misses, and she cuts him a little, and he turns and runs out of the door. They're all still like in the glass, whatever the hell's going on, they're all being cut up. He runs out the door and runs into this alley with Lenny, and he sees basically that, I hate this part of the book, Jonah comes up to him. I understand that Jonah was on his way to the exhibition, but why is Jonah in this random alley that he ended up being in? It doesn't make sense. It's okay, I guess. And they kiss, and it's cute and stuff. And he is talking. He opens his book. Also, Pony came back. Pony's been talking to him a little. And he opens his book, and he figures out the book's been writing itself. And he gives Jonah his book. Here's my opinion. I don't like this. Why not make him... Jonah doesn't like him. Just make it so Jonah doesn't like him. That is so much more interesting than Jonah loving him back. That's boring. I'm bored. And especially in this, because it was such a heavy... I wouldn't mind him liking him back if Jonah didn't explicitly say that he was in love with someone else, and if Jonah didn't explicitly say that he was done with him. It doesn't make sense. It's a plot hole. You're filling in spaces that don't connect. This story feels like it was written it feels like it was written in 3 different years. Like, these things feel like you should have planned them out more than they are planned out. So essentially, he gives the book to Jonah and he walks away. He walks down the street and he sees Tyler, the guy he was with, and they hold hands and they walk in and they become bunnies. And I love that ending. I love that he got to be a bunny. I don't understand why, though, if he was so heavy on the point of loving Jonah, that he would give that up to become a bunny. It doesn't make sense. It would have been so much better if Jonah didn't like him back and he just walked away. And that would have been it. And I know earlier I was complaining about the portrayal of queer characters, but if you're going to do that, you need to stand 10 toes down on it, and you need to not do that. You need to make sure that he doesn't like him back and give him a reason to become a bunny again. It doesn't make sense, and I don't like that. So basically they walk in, he becomes bunnies. Then we switch perspectives. Now we're at the bunny's perspective. This is the part of this book that pissed me off the most. When I tell you, dumb as hell. I don't understand why we did this, why we needed this, why this was a thing. So we switch the perspective of bunnies. They do the thing they always do. They're like, he's lying, blah, blah, blah. And then they tell their side. Basically, she's like, how'd you get the book? Basically, they snatched it off Jonah when he wasn't looking. Mind you, Jonah would have noticed. He would have known that they took the book from him. I think that's a thing that he would have realized happened. But to each their own. Then they talk about how Frosco, like, apologized to them and, like, and everyone forgave her. Mind you, she tried to kill someone. Yeah, she would be in jail. I know this book is supposed to be camp, but what are we doing? It literally, these last 10 pages try to explain everything that this book should have been about. This book should have been about what these last 10 pages are in this book. We did not need all of this. So basically, they're like, oh, like, when we saw you with her, we knew you had powers, and then we brought you into our fold. We were trying to become friends with you for all this stuff. And then they were like, oh, like, from here, like, we knew, like, we were ready for you. And then they talk about how, essentially, that they're just, like, that good. They basically are just, like, talking to her, and they're being like, yeah, like, we knew you had powers. We always knew. And then they are like, well, we're gonna publish your book, like we're gonna get this published, call your publisher, like we're gonna be famous, we're gonna be amazing. Also, this is something I just forgot to mention, I just remembered. This is Jonah's book, or not Jonah's book, this is Atreus's book. Like the cover is described as exactly what the cover of this book is. Um, but you know, so basically what happens now is they're like, we're gonna get this published, and they untie her. And they're like, we never noticed your eyes were blue before. Brother, are we being for real? Like, okay. So then they untie her and she just starts screaming and like ranting, and she takes the book and she takes the axe, she breaks the window, and they're all talking. They're like, no, Samantha. And she jumps out the window. And I bet you can see where this is going. The bunny, she jumps out the window, like, what the hell? The book's on the floor, and there's a bunny on the floor too. And then they see the real Samantha come out. She picks up the book and she walks into the bushes. That's the end of the book. Are we being for real? And I know they're writing a third one. I know Mona Awad is writing a third one. What the hell? I'm trying to keep it spoiler free as possible, but we're gonna make it work. Now we're gonna get into my review of this book, and I have a lot to say, and I have a lot to talk about. I don't know. I think this book, first of all, it's beautiful. I love this cover, by the way. But why did we write this? It never needed to have been written. It's not awful. It's not awful. The writing's good. Mona Awad is a great writer. Like you can never take that away from her. I think she's an amazing writer. I just think she doesn't know when to stop. Like, and honestly, in my opinion, I don't think she wanted to write this book. I think her publisher forced her to write this book. I think that Mona Awad had no interest in writing a second bunny book, because it's literally a different story, mind you. This whole section of the book, the majority of this book is a completely different story. I don't think she had any interest in writing this book. I think there was no reason that she wanted to write this book. This book isn't awful. It's not awful, but because it's 500 pages, and at some points it's incredibly dense. Like you're learning, like 3 pages is like half the story, and then other points it's like you're reading like 30 pages and nothing has happened. It's incredibly dense in some points and not in others, and I hate that. I hate that. Either make it incredibly dense and shorten it down, or don't. I feel like we could have cut easily so many pages from this book. We did not need the part about the poets. We did not need the part about... There were so many parts in this book that just we didn't need. It essentially, majority of this 500-page count, which I felt every part of, mind you, it just didn't need to be there. There are parts in this book that I do love. There's parts in this book, like there's some pages that are like, the pages that are like, just like, there's like the Kill Alan page, and there's like the part where he admits to being a bunny, which is not a spoiler, by the way. Those are great. I love those pages. I think they're actually amazing in every way. But I don't know. Okay. I have a few thoughts. I'm going to start with what I liked. I really liked that. I think it was a great story. I think the story in here was great. I don't think it should have been in this book. I think it should have been a separate book. Separate book, completely different. It feels like we mashed the last 10 pages in, and that was essentially what this whole book should have been. I went in here expecting a sequel. It's marketed as a sequel. I was expecting a sequel. This is not a sequel. This is not a sequel. It is just... It's a completely different story. And the characters that you know and love from the first book are barely in it. They are basically not relevant. Most of the story is Atreus. 300 pages of the story are Atreus. That's literally it. He is 90% of the story. And I don't know why. I don't understand why this is the way it is. It doesn't make sense. I'm going to talk about what I loved just to pat it out. I loved the part where they take out the razor from Pony and they're like, so he doesn't kill himself. I loved the part where he jumps out the window and he's holding the axe and Pony and he walks out. I think Atreus' story is inherently interesting. I just don't understand why it's in this book. I don't understand why we needed it in here. This isn't a bunny book. It is just inherently, it's different. And another thing I don't like the representation of queer characters in here. It can't commit to representation properly. Either Either Jonah is in love with Sam or he's not. Make a decision, stand on it. It feels like what happens is they're together and then he's like, oh no, I'm in love with Sam. And then all of a sudden he's not. Okay, but that doesn't make sense. You have to pick one. This book is so incredibly full of plot holes. It is so heavy on the plot holes. There is so many things in this book that if you read it, you're going to be sitting here and thinking, oh, that'll come back. It probably won't. And if it does, it's going to change. It is so contradictory to itself, and I just don't understand why it is that. If you're going to write a 500-page book, you need to understand what you're writing about. You need to be prepared. You need to have the story planned out. This feels like a story that was written on a whim. I think Mona Awad is a great writer. I really do. I love her writing style. It's just, it gets to a point. Also, the constant bringing up of things from the first book that you think we don't remember. It'll be like, oh, yeah, and then it'll be like bringing up, I don't want to spoil anything, so it'll be like bringing up something from the first book, and then it proceeds to explain it. Okay. Mind you, I read the first book. Mind you, if I'm reading the second book, I have read the first book. I don't like that. It feels loosely connected. Who are you Colleen Hoover? Who are you, frickin' Frida McFadden? I understand the characters. I have read the first book. I don't need you to explain everything to me. I know what has happened. And if you feel the need to explain everything to me, that shows that you don't believe in the book as much. I think Mona Awad, again, is a great writer, but I need a break from her. I will not be reading another Mona Awad book for a little bit because I don't understand. I don't understand why this was written. It's not a second bunny book. It's really just not. It's something completely different. It's a metamorphosized version. And I was thinking, because this book, I shit you not, is marketed on Goodreads as a retelling from the bunny's perspective. This is not the bunny's perspective. This is Atreus' perspective. I don't get that. Why market it in that way if you're not going to write it in that way? It's not that. It is not that. And the plot holes in this book make it so hard to get through. It is difficult. It twists in places that it doesn't need to twist. This book goes off the rails and you're expecting it to create a new rail. It doesn't. It just keeps going. It's in the dirt. It's just going in the dirt. It's just going in the dirt. Because why are we doing things like this? I don't understand. I don't understand why this book is the way it is. I was so excited for the first half. I was like, oh yes, like Atreus is out. And then there's about 200 pages of filler. In my review for the first book, I said that I think it could have been shorter by like 100 pages. This could have been 200 pages and it would have had the same effect. However, I'm going to talk about the things I liked because I don't think this is super bad. I think it's just slightly under average. It's not awful. And I didn't hate every second of it. This book is funny. It knows it's funny and it is funny. I was giggling. It's laugh out loud funny. It might not have the best writing quality and it might have plot holes in it, but it is funny. Like, it makes jokes and I'm always giggling at the jokes. I also love that it acknowledges that the bunnies aren't special, that it just knows that like they're not special. I love that it brought that up and I love the concepts inside of this book. I don't think though that this needed to be written. Most of the things on here, right, I could have gone without. And also, because the last 10 pages try to mash everything in that we should have been knowing, it didn't need to be written. You could have taken the middle 300 pages of this book and renamed all the characters, and it would have worked. Perfectly fine. You didn't need all this. And also, the way that characters in this book are completely recharacterized. Okay, we have this first book, right? This has a character setup, right? We set up our characters, we understand who they are, we have their motivations. This changes that. Freaking Jonah is like a straight man in this book. He's bisexual in this one. Freaking Frosco's all nice and annoying in this book. She's a villain in this one. And I know it tries to shoehorn it in. It still doesn't make sense. Personalities don't change like that. I'm trying to think. Kira is like kind of crazy in this book. Kira is the most sane character in this book. Samantha is just kind of trying her best, but you know, she's trying to like live her life. Samantha is a villain in this book. She is, and I know it's supposed to be a perspective change, but perspectives don't change that much. It talks about how she told the story wrong. I don't think that you can do that. This book tries to defend itself by being ambiguous, but you're not that ambiguous. You can't hide behind ambiguity when you're trying to characterize characters for a second novel. You can't change everything. Because if I loved the first novel. I thought it was phenomenally good. And I know not everyone loved it. But because I loved the first novel so much, I was so excited to read this book. I was so ready for it. And it disappointed me. I had such hope. I thought, oh my God, like this is going to be great. It wasn't. It's not horrible. It's not awful. Would I recommend it? No. I think that there are books for 500 pages that will give you so much than this. Also, in reading this, I realized I want to read The Count of Monte Cristo. I'm going to need to prepare a little bit more because damn, I just think it's just not the best. It's not the worst, but it's not the best. I don't understand why we had to write it. I think Mona Awad is a talented writer. I haven't read All's Well. I haven't read All's Well or Rogue, or I believe she has another novel outside of that too. I've heard All's Well is pretty good, but I know she's a talented writer. But this is not talented. This feels rushed, this feels unplanned, and this feels like she didn't know where the book was going. There is so many times in this book where I was disappointed in the concepts that she was trying to convey, especially when it came to queer characters. It felt like she didn't want to fully commit to a queer character, or that we were so incredibly trying to portray them as like the traditional straight version of a queer person. And not to say that queer people can't present as straightness, because straightness is literally just a concept. It's just the way that it's like weirdly talking about them. Like I'm reading this and I'm like, okay, but that doesn't work. Like, and Ira, Coraline, and Vic, their love triangle or whatever, since it's in the first section, right, it disappears. It is fully gone. You can't bring up these women being sort of in love with each other and bring it up one more time and then cut it. So to me, that feels like you just wanted to put a queer character in just to show some representation. That's not okay. I'm so sorry. That is such a weird portrayal of a queer character. You can't commit to representing something and then backing out later. And I know that inside of this book that what's his name? Atreus and Jonah are gay or whatever. But even in that, there's so many times when it pulls back on it, it's like, no, he wants Samantha more than he wants Atreus. Okay, I understand that. But at the same time, you have to find a balance. If he's queer, he's queer. If he's not, he's not. And the bisexual people exist, and I understand that. But you can't spend so much time in this book talking about how he's so in love with Samantha that he can't be in love with anyone else, and then he's going and having sex with Atreus. That doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. And you can't talk about how in love Kira is with Coraline and then be like, oh, well, actually, she's over that. Okay, like, I don't know. I don't know about all that. I just feel like at a certain point, this book breaks down. I would say at about 300 pages, it starts to break down and it loses itself, and then it picks up at the climax. The climax in this book, phenomenally good. Mona Awad, 8 with the climax. Tension's built so well. It's so great. However, we did not need the poetry section. We did not need all the murders in this story. It's too long. It's too long for what it is. And I don't like the way it talks about queer people. I don't like the way that it represents that. I don't like the way the length. We did not need the length. There was no necessity for the length. I hate the way that this book tells you things rather than trying to show you them. I hate the way that this book shoehorns things in at the end and expects me to be like, oh yeah, like I understand it now. There are so many things in the first book that are left that could be filled in by the second book, right? But they aren't. There are so many answers in this book that could have been filled in by the second. Like, why did they kill Ava? Why did this happen? Why did that happen? This doesn't answer any of it. It doesn't want to. It doesn't want to commit, and it doesn't feel like it should. This shouldn't have been a second book. You should have taken Atreus' story and changed the names and put it into a different book and then committed to actually writing a second book. And I wish that it would just commit to queer characters. If you're going to make a character queer, make them queer. Atreus, though, I will give, is a great queer character. He is fully queer. But Jonah doesn't know where the fuck he sits, and then he's changing 24/7 who he's in love with, and I know love can work like that, but it's not like that when you're constantly bringing it up over and over and over again and shoving it in my face, trying to tell me that he will never get with Atreus, and then he does. You're trying to build tension for something that you're just going to give up on. That doesn't make sense. And I hate the way that Kiravik and Coraline are presented in this. They are supposed to be quote-unquote queer, and then all of a sudden they give it up. I don't like that. I hate when stories and shows or whatever do that because you're just showing that you're only using it for a marketing tactic rather than actually caring about the stories themselves. I think this book is 3 stars. It's definitely not the worst thing I've read. It's definitely not the best. I think there's better, and I think there's a whole lot better. I am scared for the 3rd book. And I honestly believe Mona Awad did not want to write this. I really don't think this was the book she wanted to write, but I think she had to. I honestly am kind of baffled. It's not horrible. It's not super bad. I think if you really love the first book, you could get through the second book. I think if you really love the first book and you just love the environment of the first book rather than the individual characters, I think you'll love this. I think you'll love it. I think that as long as you have to really love the world. And I liked the world. I thought it was interesting, but I was never so in love with the world that I didn't notice the characters. You know what I mean? Like, I always was more interested in the characters than the actual world itself. And you have to be in love with the world for this book to work for you. Also, I think a lot of it is just the way that it loops itself so many times that it doesn't even know where it's going. Oh, all of a sudden they know about this. Oh, they know about this. Oh, this happened, this happened, this happened. And since so many things are happening in this book consistently and not consistently, the story starts to break down. You don't even understand where you are at a certain point, and you're just reading it and you're like, well, that contradicts exactly what you said 3 pages ago. And then you expect it to explain the contradiction, and it doesn't. This is definitely not the worst thing I've read. I think if you love the first book and you love the environment, you'll love this. I think if you just want a book about a crazy guy who's just popped into a world he doesn't understand, you'll love this book. I would not recommend going into this, though, expecting a sequel. Do not go into We Love You, Bunny expecting a sequel because it's not a sequel. It's a completely separate story almost, and I'm very horrified for the thought of a 3rd book because a 3rd book? Are you shitting me? Mona Awad, girl, I think you're talented. I think you're undoubtedly talented. Look at me in my eyes when I say this. Don't write a 3rd book. Don't do it. We don't want a 3rd book. We don't need a 3rd book. Leave it at this. It's not worth the cash grab. We don't need a 3rd book. I saw someone talking about this as a cash grab. Mona Awad, as much as I respect you, girl, this is a cash grab. This is such a cash grab because it's unfinished. It doesn't feel like it cares about its characters as much. It changes characterization. It's very well established in the first book. This first book is developed. It feels like it knows what it wants to say, and it says it quick. But there is a problem with the first book, which it doesn't really have a general theme. This is the same way. This is worse. Everything that happened in this book is turned to 10 in this book. Everything that was bad in this book is 3 times worse in here. I agree that I think this is cash grab. I don't think she wanted to write this book, but if you love the world and you really love the characters and you don't mind losing them for a part in the story, I think you'll like it. I don't personally understand how this could be a 5 stars, but if it's a 5-star for you, I could see that and I support you in your journey. But that's going to be it for me with this book. This video took so long to film. It has been about 5 days of me filming this video because of how long this book is. Anyway, with that, I wish you the best, and that's it for me.